Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello and welcome back, everybody. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi everybody, it's so nice to be here. My name is Claire Inglis, so I'm based in a little town north of England called Carlisle, and I'm currently the principal lecturer for the arts at the University of Cumbria. And I wanted to come here today to talk about being a neurodivergent woman, working in a leadership role, and also getting stories, lived experience stories out there. So essentially my story comes from my development of who I am as a person around my neurodivergence. I didn't realize I was neurodivergent until I reached 40, which is quite a common experience, especially for women. We are massively underdiagnosed. And I've been to university, I've traveled abroad, taught English in Spain and Hong Kong, and was really just trying to work out who I was for quite a few years. And then I started working in nursing. I actually trained as a nurse in 2010. And as I progressed, I went into health visiting. So health visiting is where you look after children, and you are responsible for making sure that parents have good advice and support and things from 0 to 5. It's a really rewarding job, but I found that towards the later years that I was health visiting, I started to feel like there was something not quite right. I started to take on a lot of responsibility, and I ended up in burnout, which again is a common experience for women who are in their 40s, 50s who get diagnosed as neurodivergent. And that was really the spark that led to me going to the doctor and asking about possibly being autistic. Then I was put on the referral pathway, which took a long 8 months, but I know the waiting times in England now are much longer than that, unfortunately. But the realization suddenly that I was autistic and I could explain everything about myself and I could understand myself so much better, and I found my community really started to make a difference. And the first thing that happened to me was I started to integrate all of that into the person that I am and the leader that I've become. I went into academia in 2020. That was really important to me. It's somewhere I always wanted to be from an early age, so it was such a big boon. And I wonder if some of the confidence came from becoming neurodivergent, starting to realize who I was, and accepting the kind of things that I wanted to do, and pursuing that really. So I moved up through lecturer to simulation development lead. And that's really when I started to look at lived experience, not just for myself, but for other people. So I started to look at simulations and immersive experiences that captured lived experience. And that was really important to me. I felt that simulation, and especially digital simulation, tends to get used as a learning tool. And quite rightly, in the first instance, that's what it was designed for. But I realized there was an opportunity here to capture people's experiences, to develop empathy, to develop understanding. So for example, we had a deaf student with us on placement, and she developed an immersive experience around her experience of being deaf, and that was very important to be put out there. So that's the work that I started to develop. And then I moved up into my role in the arts, which is where I am now, and just starting my PhD looking at capturing the immersive experience of neurodivergent people. I find that we are not represented very well, and that traditional systems that are in place just leave people like me feeling disconnected. And so I would like immersive experiences, and particularly from an artistic perspective, to capture those experiences and help that connection, so there's a better understanding of us, and also that we have a lot of ownership. And I feel like in my leadership role, it's a good place to be an advocate for other neurodivergent people. I support staff, I support students. I'm very open about being autistic, and people know they can come to me, and hopefully as my PhD develops, we can capture those experiences and reclaim that ownership of what it is like to be neurodivergent, and build that sense of empathy. From a health perspective, it's thinking about reimagining how we train and care and how we connect as nurses and other professions within the health industry. But just generally, I think it's really important to get that feeling of what it's like to be neurodivergent from a very realistic perspective, from a very practical perspective, so that people understand us better, and hopefully those traditional ideas of society start to shift. That's what I would like to see ultimately, is that shift. And I think I'm in the perfect position, being neurodivergent myself and being in this role, to start to enhance that shift and support other people with that. So that's really my story, and that's where I'm at the minute. I'm really keen to develop immersive experiences. I use a lot of digital work, so I'm interested in things like live performance, immersive theatre, something called playback theatre. But I really do use a lot on the digital side, so immersive rooms, VR experiences. And I think that's really important because it helps put it in a platform that everybody can hopefully access, with obviously adjustments and things. And I think that my approach is, it's not about educating people perhaps, but it's about opening the door and creating space for questions that we haven't asked yet, or that haven't been addressed. And it's providing that platform for people to have those discussions with each other about not just neurodivergence, but obviously that's going to be the starting point for me because it's very personal. I've just had she's 2 now. I've got a little girl who's 2 years old as well, so I'm also juggling that. And my husband has ADHD. I'm fairly confident that she'll be neurodivergent of some description. So also building a future for her where traditional landscapes have shifted to something else that suits her better, and that provides an environment in which she can thrive, rather than meeting up against all the difficulties and challenge that I must have faced when I was younger. And certainly more difficult for me, I would imagine, because I didn't know I was autistic for all those years. I went through school, I went through university, and the various roles that I've held has been difficult. Not knowing I'm autistic, it has put me in a better place being diagnosed, because I'm able to think about, well, perhaps that's why I've had that reaction, or perhaps that's why that's a difficult thing for me to do. Things around executive dysfunction, rejection sensitive dysphoria, pathological demand avoidance, and those kind of things that really affect your day-to-day living and how you approach things. I'm hoping to change the environment for my child and for other people, so that when they go out into the world as a neurodivergent, it's a much more inclusive and accepting place to be. On the grander scale, I think I would, Gertrude, I think I, you know, eventually look to change policy. I am the co-chair for the Innovate UK working group on accessibility and technology. So on a larger scale, I think I can affect change. But just from a personal perspective, I just want to make things better for my child and for everybody else's.
Well, Claire, you certainly have had a fascinating journey to get to where you are now. It couldn't have been easy for you. And I would like to know, how does your identity as an AuDHD leader,
Yes.
your approach to leadership? And please explain that acronym to us so everybody understands.
So AuDHD, I don't know, I'm not sure I've heard anybody pronounce it, but I'm diagnosed autistic, but I'm pretty sure I have ADHD as well.
Yes.
Sometimes you would have a combination of both, sometimes not. So it is challenging because autism and ADHD have a lot of commonalities, but also can be very separate, and sometimes they can be in battle with one another. Autism can make you quite anxious, quite rigid and inflexible, seeing things black and white, whereas ADHD can be around losing focus and having a sort of executive dysfunction, and sometimes they can be in battle with one another. I think on a day-to-day basis in leadership, it's important to be understanding of yourself, and this is where diagnosis comes in. Diagnosis isn't for everybody, and of course self-diagnosis is completely valid, but it does help you understand yourself better and be more forgiving. I'm very open about when I'm struggling. Even as a leader, you can't always manage in the same way that other people would manage, and if executive dysfunction kicks in, or if you have some kind of brain fog or fatigue, you have to manage your energy levels differently to how other people would do. I think it's helpful to have that conversation with other people around how that manifests itself. You know, sometimes your energy can be so high that you'd be working like 3 times the person, and sometimes it's just completely in your boots and you can't do anything at all. So it's being understanding of yourself, accepting that, and deciding your day, your week, your month around how your autism or how your ADHD is manifesting. And it's just being really honest with people and telling them, and not being embarrassed about things. I'm sure a lot of leaders, and female leaders especially, because of the pressure you would be placed under, would worry about being quite emotional on some days, not having the energy to focus or to cope with certain tasks. But we can't cultivate that environment anymore because it's exclusionary, and it doesn't allow neurodivergent people to move into leadership roles. There are only 30% of autistics in work, which is a terrifying statistic. And a lot of it is because of the pressures that they face and the flexibility that they need that a traditional framework doesn't allow for. And if you think about neurodivergence within that environment, already not working, but trying to move up through leadership roles, I'm probably quite unique in that sense because I've been able to do it. But it is very difficult to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I can imagine the type of environment where you're expected to push and push and push is going to exclude neurodivergence from female leadership roles.
Yeah, it's amazing that you've managed to come this far and to discover at the age of 40 that, you know, this is what you were up against. So what does it mean to move beyond accommodation towards true inclusion?
I think it's like I said, my perspective from the immersive side is to help people understand why that is difficult. we created in my team a piece around dementia. And the reason I bring this up is obviously it's very different, but it wasn't designed to replicate dementia, but it was designed to challenge you in the way that dementia might challenge you. So there were things around tasks that would confuse the brain, or that things that would reset to the beginning against your will. So it wasn't, we never thought this is what dementia feels like exactly, but we wanted you to feel the frustrations and challenges of that somebody with dementia might feel, to give that experience and to build that empathy. And I really think that's the important thing. You've met, they say that you've met one autistic, and that's true. So we can't capture the whole experience of everybody, but we could maybe capture the frustration of brain fog, or executive dysfunction. We could possibly put you in an environment where you feel that frustration, and you would go away with a completely different sense of the person you were dealing with in future, because you'd had that very real lived experience. And of course, I talk about ownership a lot, because I'd like neurodivergence to be at the forefront of describing and explaining their experience, so that if we do put an immersive experiences out there, it directly captures their experience.
Yeah, you know, there's such a big need, like you're saying, for the description of the experience.
Yeah.
Somebody who's not neurodivergent, we don't know. We don't even know how to support. We don't know how to help.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So can you tell us about the work at ARNN and why it's important, and what does that acronym stand for?
Yeah, so I founded a network called Autistic Research Network North. The reason we limited it to the North in the first instance is just capacity and trying to set things up. So I thought I would see if there was a need for that kind of community. And actually, it's really funny. At first, we were talking about having conferences and doing research, and you know, your typical sort of academic network where you're publishing and it's all very practical. But the thing that's caught the most interest and attention and has been the most useful has actually been the WhatsApp group. So we started a WhatsApp group just for chatting, for support, and this is what I mean about this experience and just talking about what it's like to be neurodivergent. It's been very difficult to find a space to have that discussion, and autistics particularly, we've always tended to be quite hidden away. These communities are emerging, but they've always been very small and covert, and especially with people not coming out, let's say, it's been very hard to find other people in your community or your tribe. So funnily enough, the WhatsApp group absolutely exploded, because people could say, this happens to me. Oh my goodness, this happens to me as well, and me, and me. And you suddenly find you're in a community where everybody's sharing. Yeah, and it's so crazy to think we'd gone in with our really practical, right, let's do this and let's have this output, and actually, you know, that wasn't the main thing that people were interested in. They just wanted to find somebody like them. And since then, I'm finding that communities are emerging. So Manchester University have started a network, and people have started joining, and then they've come to our network as well, and things like that. And even at Cumbria, where I am, it's building. Sorry, Gertrude.
I said, so you've started a whole movement, something really big. It's catching on.
I don't know about that, but trying to build those communities. And it really is one of the things that was really helpful. Unfortunately, I know Twitter's taken a bit of a dive now, but at the time, we were using the hashtag actually autistic, and that was where you found your community. So it was really easy through that hashtag to find people who had similarities, and that's essentially how we were doing it to start off with before things started to build. But honestly, the WhatsApp group is filled with people, and more people joining. And like I said, these other university communities have started to expand. And it's just really nice to see people finding commonalities and having somewhere to go to talk about their experience. We were all feeling so isolated to start with. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I will disappear after I ask, because there's a few pivotal things that I think people need to understand about this world. How do you embed neurodivergent insight into strategic decision planning?
Mm-hmm. So I think that, especially where I work, because I work in the arts and we do have a large neurodivergent ratio, there's quite a large community there. From my perspective, it's impossible to leave it out. But actually, when you look at things on paper, what you find is that adjustments that you make for neurodivergent people are always going to benefit everybody. So why not include them into those strategic decisions? For example, if you're thinking about university assessment, and of course the current buzzword is authentic assessment. So this is assessment that replicates real world activities. So if you're nursing, you could be doing a simulation that's assessed on going into a family home and doing an assessment with a patient or something like that. And in the arts, if you were a graphic designer, you would put a portfolio together for a client and you would present that portfolio. So authentic assessments around making it seem like real life, to make it more relevant to students, which is a great thing. But within that, if you think about neurodivergence and what would help them, options would help them. If you start to think about interviews now and applications for jobs, they're saying you could fill this form in, or you could do a video presentation for your job application, which I'm sure didn't exist sort of 5-10 years ago. And if you think about the benefit for a neurodivergent person, if you're autistic on one side, ADHD on another, dyslexic, dyspraxic, all the different types, and what might suit you, it might be a video presentation, it might be audio, it might be a portfolio, it might be a written assessment, it might be an exam. But if you think about how those options benefit a neurodivergent person, they would absolutely benefit any student. So not just targeting neurodivergent. And what we're doing at the minute at universities is we're thinking about each individual. So we would make a modification for an individual student based on their neurodivergence to present their work in a different way. But actually what I'm thinking is, why are we not building into strategy different options for everybody, so that everybody can access? And the most inclusive thing I can think of is finding a way to have options for everybody to tailor to their needs and produce their best work. Why would we not give people the opportunity to showcase their best instead of this constant one size fits all that's very frustrating?
I think this is going to revolutionize education if these concepts are really embraced in every academic institution. Wow. So why is immersive technology such a powerful tool for education?
So immersive technology, I think that there's two strands to this. So one I've already spoken about in a way. If you think about immersion, it puts you right in the frame. So you can become another person. If you think about games, you can become a character, you can completely become somebody else and live their life and experience their life. So it gives us that opportunity to find that commonality with people that we don't generally interact with. So that's the first way that we can use it. Of course, the other way is as reasonable adjustment. So I've recently presented at the Times Higher Education Digital Conference at Lancaster Uni, which is wonderful. But it's essentially thinking about technology as a reasonable adjustment. So particularly AI, and I know this is a very divided community. Some people are very for AI, some people are very against it. But I honestly personally don't think I would get through life currently without the use of AI. It helps me formulate reports and outlines. No sense of it replacing creativity or any of those things, which would be awful. But when used appropriately, it could be an assistant. It can be just somebody to chat to when you need some help working through some ideas.
Yes.
If you're an ADHD and you have brain fog, there's nothing like AI for helping you out of a hole and moving your ideas forward. So I think we need to start looking at AI as something that can support everyday living, particularly for disabled and neurodivergent people, because in that sense, it's absolutely wonderful. And we could build that into reasonable adjustments for students, for and start to move things forward. I just think there's so much hope.
My goodness. Okay, I'm going to take a little commercial break here and just share with our community our upcoming events. We are currently recruiting speakers for the Her Story Online Summit. It's going to be on the 22nd to the 31st of August, 2025. So please go online, everybody, register to speak, herstorycircle.net/apply to speak. We are looking for speakers from all over the world, and those who are picked will get to participate in the in-person events as well later on this year. So we will continue with our interview. And now I want to delve into some of the biggest misconceptions about neurodivergent leadership. Tell us some of them.
I think that's probably something I've touched on earlier around ability to cope.
Yes.
And I think, we're already coming from a position where there's a concept of hysterical women. And I think it's really important. I know it's terrible, but it's really important that we think about and acknowledge that starting point, that women are perceived differently. Emotion is very difficult to talk about within a leadership role, particularly any workplace. But in leadership, there seems to be no place for emotion. From a personal perspective, I've been emotional. I've had rejection sensitive dysphoria in meetings and become emotional and become teary. And I know it's not perceived in a positive way that you are in touch with your emotions or that you're allowed to have feelings about things that are happening. It's just seen as oh, she's not coping, or is she fit for this role, particularly in leadership. How do we start to reframe that as actually she's a human person? As soon as I got into a leadership role, I wasn't Claire anymore, I was management, which is very frustrating. But then, of course, by dehumanizing you and labeling you as management, you can't have feelings, you shouldn't have feelings. And how do we address that? Because I think particularly neurodivergent people are going to have these big feelings, and sometimes they will spill over. So how do we reframe the way that people address that? And how do we talk about the fact that doesn't affect your ability to do your role or be in your position? It's worrying. It's something to think about.
So many challenges. So we're going to end the interview with two last questions, which are a bit of a thought experiment.
Yeah.
In the first one, I want to teleport you back.
Okay.
To the younger you, the young woman who perhaps struggled with things in college and school, didn't know why she was different and what that felt like. Now you've got the words to describe it. Now you can explain it, right? But can you imagine when you are a child or when you're younger and you just have no idea how to explain how you are feeling different? So if you could go back and give her 3 nuggets of wisdom based on what life has taught you up to this point? And if there's more than 3, give us more than 3.
Okay.
Because I'm doing this in case there's a young person who's listening to this podcast right now and really gets it and is looking for support and tools.
Yeah.
What nuggets of wisdom can you share?
Yeah. I think the first one is, do not judge yourself by neurotypical standards, because you are always going to feel like you are failing. And I would come to a TED talk that Jack Van Houting did, and she said, I realized I wasn't a poor neurotypical, I was a good neurodivergent. And I think it makes me really emotional thinking about that, because that's probably where a lot of autistics stand when they get diagnosed. You realize there's nothing wrong with you. So don't judge yourself by what's out there in traditional standards of society and leadership, because that's not you. You are very successful neurodivergent. So find your own path and make your own way. Find your community if you can, and find ways to reach out to people, even if you suspect they're neurodivergent but you don't know for sure. There are plenty of studies out to show that we tend to find each other. So it's very likely, if you're neurodivergent, that your friend, your partner, is also neurodivergent in some way, because apparently studies show that we do tend to reach out to each other and just come across each other, and we form those friendships, I suppose, because we feel connected to those people more and we have more in common with them. And I think I would say that it doesn't matter if you change lots and lots of times. So I studied art in 2000, and then I went and taught English abroad. I lived in Spain and I lived in Hong Kong, and then I came into nursing, and then I came into health visiting, and then I moved up through simulation, and now with the arts. And it's fine to do that, because you're exploring what it is you want to do and who you are, and that's also part of neurodivergent identity. So I think those are the 3 things I would say.
This is fascinating listening to you speak. I've always thought I was on the spectrum, but I couldn't quite explain it. I am like a flea. I cannot stick to one thing for too long.
You might be AuDHD, you never know.
My career started in IT. I was a COBOL programmer, systems analyst in IT, hated it. Then I did a business studies degree, majored in industrial psychology and management. Then I started a recruiting agency. I have been an actress. I went back to college and became a filmmaker.
Amazing. But we're just, it's so good to explore. And one thing I've never worried about is giving something up. I've never seen it as a failure. I've just seen it as actually quite a brave thing to do, to move on to something else, because if you're in the wrong thing, you're going to be deeply unhappy forever. Why would you do that to yourself?
No, I love it. Last question is futuristic this time.
Okay.
And I am going to teleport you into the future. And we are going to go and meet the 90-year-old you.
Oh, gosh.
She is sitting in her rocking chair, surrounded by her children, her grandchildren, or with science and technology, you'll probably be on a dance floor somewhere doing something different, learning tango or salsa. So if I could take you to go and meet this wise woman who has changed the lives of thousands of people by helping change the education system, This wise woman who's been whispering in your ear and telling you to go left, go right, say yes, say no, advocate, advocate, advocate. What will you say to her when you finally meet her?
I would say you did all the right things, because if you hadn't, you wouldn't be here now where you are. I think this ties into what I would say to younger me as well, that you know, you have to make mistakes, and they are often the greatest way of learning. You've done so many wonderful things. You've got your beautiful child and your husband, and you've just nailed it. And even if things have gone wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm quite confident that at 90 I still won't regret, because there's things that maybe other people would think, I wish I hadn't done that, but it's impossible not to have done those things, because you wouldn't be the person that you are right now if you hadn't. So no regrets. And I'm hoping 90-year-old me, I'm sure, would say no regrets.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much, Claire, for coming online and sharing your story with our community today. It inspires me when I get to connect and learn from other women. There's so much that you've said today that has unpacked things in my life, in my children's lives. And for me to have the privilege to share your story on our platform is an absolute honor. Just keep doing the work and know that we're here supporting you. And I'll get to hug you when you come to Wellington for the conference.
Yay, please.
I
really hope anybody that wants to gets in touch with me. I'm such an open door. If anybody even has a feeling that there's something around neurodivergence they want to talk about, my door is always open to anybody to have that conversation. So please get in touch.
Fantastic. So we've got your LinkedIn profile at the bottom of the screen if anybody wants to reach out, or maybe you might know someone who needs support. You might know someone who has a child. Sometimes it's not about you when you listen to these podcasts. We all know somebody who's struggling. So thank you for tuning in, everybody. The Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We are a social impact movement that brings you the stories and voices of women from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift you, to inspire you, to energize you, but most importantly, to help you with tools to take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Claire, thanks again for the interview.
Thank you.
Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories